What is up, my fellow fly fishermen? Graham Ferguson here, host of Flycast in Colorado. I am really sorry about not uploading for like 2 weeks straight now. That's my bad. I have been super overwhelmed, had a ton of stuff to do. I'm telling you, I can't do anything without cars going. But anyway, you guys, for quite a while now, I've actually really been wanting to do a tie and fish video where I tie up a fly and then I go and fish it and you guys get to see how it works. And yeah, so I got enough footage to actually make one of those, and I decided because runoff is right around the corner, I should probably do a stillwater sort of stillwater video, because stillwater is definitely one of my favorite things to do while runoff is still going on. And it is actually really cold outside, so I am actually going to transition and go back into the house for a much warmer setting right now. Yeah, so basically what I have decided to tie up for you guys is a pine squirrel leech. Now, the pine squirrel leech has got to be one of my favorite streamer patterns. It is absolutely deadly on stillwater, and if you tie it in a small enough size, you can actually use it dead drifting in a lot of different rivers for imitating small leeches or small minnows or whatever you really want. A lot of the streamers that I fish with are actually quite bulky, and I've noticed that that's probably why a lot of fish end up getting spooked off. So I really like the pine squirrel leech because it is a awesome fly to kind of go after those smaller forage species while also giving you a nice streamer pattern to fish. I really like to use it on like a sinking line or something, and you really can't have enough of these, honestly, because a lot of times where you're fishing these, it's really rocky, you're getting down deep, you're breaking off a lot. So if you're going to do some stillwater fishing while there's runoff going on, definitely have a bunch of these in your box. So the first step in tying the pine squirrel leech is going to be, well, of course, securing the hook into the vise. Then you can begin to advance your thread down the shank of the hook all the way to about where the bend begins. Then you can take your scissors and trim or break off your excess thread and then wind it back up towards the bead. Then you're going to want to take your zonker strips. Warning, they will give you cancer, so I wouldn't recommend them, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make for you guys to tie this fly. Then you're going to want to strip off a 2.5, maybe 1.5 inch strand of zonker, and then you're going to want to take your scissors and you're going to want to begin to kind of cut it down the middle. However, it's almost like cutting off 1/3 of the side, because you want to make sure that you still have all of the hair on one of the sides, or else you're just going to end up with one sparsely thin, bad strip of just skin. So yeah, make sure that you have all of that and it matches up with the hair, and then you can begin to tie that in. And remember, don't strip off the tip where you tie it in, because it'll look a lot more natural and give it a better look in the tail if you just leave those fibers there. And then you can tie it to where you stopped tying down your thread, and you can just tie that in nice and securely, making sure that there aren't any bumps or grooves in there from tying it in. And then you can cut off your excess if there is any, and make sure the tail is positioned how you like it. In this instance, I would want to then start on my dubbing loop, which I have a trick for you guys, which works very well. When you first make the dubbing loop, do a few wraps around it, almost like it's the post of a parachute, and that'll really help. And then another thing is, you don't really need hackle pliers for this. I'm just hanging my whip finish tool on there. Next, what you're going to want to do is take another strip of zonker, and once you have trimmed off a small bit of it, you're going to want to hold it and then start trimming off some of the zonker at the very base, making sure you trim off as much of it as possible and hold that very, very tightly so that you're not losing any of the fibers. Then pull away the other bit of the zonker so you have that and the tips are nice and aligned. And then you're going to want to put that butts first into the dubbing loop. And once you have it positioned how you like, if the tips and butts aren't exactly lined, you could give it a few taps. Then start twisting your dubbing loop fires or your whip finish tool until it looks nice and secure. And then once you have done that, you can begin to wrap the dubbing loop around, making sure that with each wrap you are pulling back the fibers to make sure that they're all nice and combed, brushed, and pointing backwards, so that way it has a much better look and it flows a lot nicer when it's actually in the water. So once you have done that, you can then secure the dubbing loop with your thread, making sure that it is nice and secure and won't come unraveled, which would basically force you to repeat the entire process. And then once you're done with that, you can take the other little bit of the zonker that you have got, and then do the same thing that I did before, making sure that you pinch tightly on the tips and then trim as close to the skin as you can. Then take that and put it in butts first into your dubbing loop, and then once it's all even, begin to twist to make sure that the dubbing loop is nice and secure and very twisted so that the hair won't start falling out. Then you can do the exact same thing as before, just make sure that you're pulling all the fibers rearwards, and you can begin to wrap that around the shank of the hook. And yeah, I recommend using a few dubbing loops in those small little bits, because once you try to go overboard with the amount of zonker fibers you put in there, I've noticed that it gets a lot trickier, and a lot of times the fibers will just kind of fall out, and then you'll end up losing a ton of zonker, and that stuff's not cheap. So definitely do it in really small segments, no larger than you need to. And then once you're done with that, you can just repeat this step a couple of times, and you should be nearing the end of the fly. So now that you have done that a few times, you can whip finish the fly. And once you have done that, I'd like to do 5 or 6 turns. So when you do that and trim off the end of your fibers, this is really personal preference, but I really like my tail to be more skinny than the body. And so I'll trim off kind of like the lighter colored fibers on the tail and then wet it down. And there you go. There's your pine squirrel leech. It's an awesome fly, and it's absolutely killer in still water. And here's a few clips of me actually fishing this fly. So at the time of recording this video, I am not currently using sinking line. However, I did just pick up a sinking leader, which should really help. And basically when you're fishing this fly, you really just want to strip it in very, very slow. And as you saw there, when that fish took it, it was a pretty subtle take, and I'm really not stripping in the fly all that fast. You can crawl it, all sorts of different retrieves, but just make sure you're slowing it down and you're not stripping in too fast. There you go, guys, first fish of the day. So release. To the water he goes. Here we go. Got one. So if you were watching the take, you will see that it is actually very, very subtle, and it's kind of hard to tell when you get the take. So whenever you feel that strike, just kind of give it a nice strip set, because you can't make up for if it's just weeds. And this fish had a red eye, which made it look pretty dope. So the last tip that I will give you guys when you are fishing this fly is to actually use 2 of them. And this won't always work, but there are a lot of times where if you're using 2 of these flies, if the fish passes up the first fly and it's immediately followed by the second, a lot of times that second fly will trigger an immediate strike from the fish because it's already interested in something that it could be feeding on. Here's another one. Not huge, but he's a beauty. Look at that, guys. Here's the release. There he goes. Beautiful fish. So yeah, you guys, now I'm starting to pick up some steam. So, I hope you guys had a uber awesome time watching this video. It was a ton of fun to film. I've always wanted to do a tie-in fish sort of video, so it's awesome to get that out. Again, I really do apologize for the lack of uploads lately. All sorts of stuff's been going on. As a matter of fact, I actually lost my old outro in the depths of whatever was going on, like going through deleting all the useless footage I had on here, and all sorts of stuff was going on, so I actually don't have an outro, but I'm working on a new intro and a new outro right now, so maybe by next video I will have one, but I'm still working on that. So yeah, I hope you guys like the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Peace out.